Hey gang, today we're heading to Estonia, to the beautiful city of Tallinn. We are jumping on a ferry from Helsinki. This is where I saw this interesting water fountain. The ferry ride is about, I think it was 2 hours and 40 minutes, so it's not too long. You're going straight across the Baltic Sea, and it's not too expensive. We paid about 20 euros. I suppose it's much more if you want to bring a car, but we were on foot. Tallinn is a medieval port, and today I'll show you why it should absolutely be on your bucket list. The first thing that might surprise you when you first arrive in Tallinn, it's those little robots. Can you see the self-driving robot there? They are food deliveries. Estonia is a success story in terms of the tech industry. It has become the Silicon Valley of the Baltics. Those little robots would cost you 99 cents of a euro to get you delivery from a supermarket, from a shop, from your favorite cafes. It is an Estonian invention. They are everywhere here. They're really cute and they're completely self-driven. Apparently the startup did make it to America, but one of those little robots got hit by a train, sadly. They have been experimenting in Estonia with self-driving buses. They're already running. There are a lot of tech startups that originated here in Estonia. Some of them you might have heard of, like Skype, the video calling software, Wise, the transfer platform, the bank transfer, and Bolt, that's the taxi company on scooters and so on. The guy that created Bolt, he was 19 years old. The Tallinn Old Town is on the UNESCO World Heritage, and I suppose to explain all the different style of architectures that you can see here, I need to tell you about the different invasions of the country. We used to have Baltic tribes here trading mainly umber, and then eventually the Danes came here, like King Valdemar II, and they invaded. After that, you had some German religious groups that invaded here. They wanted to convert people. Because the Romans never came all the way here, Estonia was one of the last countries in Europe to be Christianized. You'll see a lot of amazing churches in Tallinn, but Estonia is probably the country in Europe, if not in the world, that is the least religious. It's known as the last pagan country. After those religious groups, the Swedish crown took over. And that is remembered as a fairly good time, actually, because after the Swedish, the Russians took over. And that lasted until after the First World War. That's why you'll see a lot of beautiful Orthodox churches around here. After the First World War, Estonia had its first independence. Sadly, that did not last long, because with the Second World War, the Russians took over again. Then the Nazis managed to take over. At first, Estonians almost saw that as a liberation, but then the Russians took over again, and after the war, the Russians stayed. They occupied here for about 50 years, although Estonians were quietly rebelling for their freedom. Eventually, in 1991, Estonia got its independence back again. But those were not easy times. In the 90s, Estonians had no money. It was really hard to rebuild an economy. Some of the shops' shelves were empty. They lacked petrol for the ambulances. So today, it's become an amazing success story, really, especially in terms of the tech industry. Those many years of Soviet occupation were really hard as well. Lots of Estonians were sent to some kind of concentration camps and prisons in Siberia. We're now heading to the stunning market square, a medieval market square, and on top of the guild hall there's a little statue that we can't really see from here. It is Old Thomas, or Vana Thomas, as they would say locally. Thomas was a young boy that always followed his mum to the market square, as his mum was a fishmonger. And Thomas, as a young boy, was really good at shooting arrows. There is Thomas. One day, as a boy, he was able to shoot all the way from down here the little bird that was placed as a decoration on top of the guild hall. And after that, they invited him to join the army. For the rest of his life, old Thomas was giving candies to the kids on the market square. Today, if any gentleman was giving sweets at the market to the kids, he probably would not be as much appreciated. When Thomas died, all the local kids were asking for Old Thomas, and because the parents did not really fancy a full-on conversation about death, they then decided to have a statue of him on top of the guild hall, so when the kids asked for Thomas, they could just point out to the sky up there. We are now in the Danish king's gardens. Apparently this is the site of a battle between the Danish king Valdemar II and the Estonians. From here you get a lovely view over the old town, and there's also some interesting and slightly creepy statues. They are fairly new. They've actually been given about 8 years ago by a lovely, wealthy gentleman. Today, Estonia is probably a lovely country to live in. Well, apart from the winter. I hear winter can be quite rough. Luckily, I visited in June, so I had a lovely weather. It's amazing in terms of bureaucracy. There is far less bureaucracy here than most countries in Europe. You do your taxes online, you vote online. They have a female prime minister at the moment. You have an ID card with all your documents online. Now, this beautiful building here, you would not guess from the outside, but that was the head office of the KGB. In the basement, you had the interrogation rooms as well as the prison cells. Today, it's a little museum, so you can go and hear about the atrocities of that period. Now, in the 90s, right after independence, there were some very interesting use of public money. Like this lovely toilet here apparently costed, in today's money, about 200,000 euros. We don't know why, probably a bit of corruption. Today, Estonia is part of the European Union, it's part of NATO, they pay with euro, and their prime minister has been quite vocal against their neighbor, Putin. So much so that the Russian ambassador has left the country. This lovely view, it's from a church spire. At the time when it was built, it was the tallest in the world. And if you're ready for a few steps, quite a few, for €5 you can get up there and have this amazing view. You might see some cruise ships in the distance. The first one came here in 2002. So Estonia is developing its tourism as well. The main language here is Estonian, but there's also quite a few Russian speakers. In Tallinn, it is up to 44% of Russian speakers. That's why you see a lot of Orthodox churches, because the Russians, some of them, lots of them still go to church. The Estonians, very few of them go to church, though. Only 4% of the Estonians actually consider themselves religious. Many actually believe in the power of nature. There's more tree huggers than believers. So I guess you can say it's a pagan nation. Anyway, let me introduce you to Steven. This is Steven the Seagull, named after Steven Seagal, the actor. He's so often photographed that he's got his own Instagram account. We are now in the Hipster area. an area that used to be full of factories and that today is full of trendy bars and restaurants and co-working spaces where a lot of those new startups are settled. In terms of food, Estonian cuisine is not necessarily massively original. A lot of the influences are German or Russian. And apparently in the last maybe 10 or 15 years, actually, they've been trying to create some modern Estonian cuisine. And you have some of those medieval restaurants that are quite fun as well. And if on your bottle you see this little logo there with a letter on a bottle, well, you can then take it to be recycled in a mat. Hey, so I got my bottle. Let's try. So, English please. You would have paid a deposit of 10p for your bottle, so with that machine you can get your deposit back. 10p, yeah! Up. And I have one more. 20p, yeah! Where is my receipt? I love it because I always feel like I win the lottery every time I get my money back. And I guess for some of you it might not be so strange because they've got them in Scotland now, and I hear you've got them in Canada as well. Let me show you what happens though if you bring a can from a different country. This one doesn't count. That's a shame though, because the material is probably still recyclable. They could still take it and not give me any money. Tallinn also has some amazing beaches. You could jump on a bus and be at the beach in less than 20 minutes. You might also spot some very pretty ladies. Apparently Estonians are particularly beautiful. A lot of them go into modeling. And you've got those amazing little cabins that you can use to change. Instead of struggling with your towel to change from your bikini, you can use those little cabins to hide. When going for a swim though, you might have a bit of a surprise. The Baltic Sea is actually very low in salt. That surprised me, I didn't know. When I went for a little dip, then I couldn't feel any itchiness in my eyes, so I licked my skin and it was not salty at all. If those lovely beaches make you want to move to Estonia, do bear in mind that the language is particularly difficult to learn. Estonian is from the same family as Finnish language, and they kind of stitch words together to make a longer term. But if one finishes by a vowel and the next one starts by a vowel, you end up with A, or you can have up to 4 A or 4 U's in a row. So it can be quite difficult to pronounce. Not that you really have to learn the language. Most Estonians speak very good English. The level of education here is very high. And you've got some lovely areas like this one here on the seaside. Apparently, though, there can be massive discrepancies between the salary of those people working in tech. They might be using those little igloo. This is igloo land. Those little saunas can be used as a meeting room. Apparently, for people moving into Estonia, going into a sauna, a naked sauna with your boss, might be a little bit intimidating, but it is something they do here. But yeah, apparently people working for those tech startups, they do make on average far more money than the average or the minimum wage. So there's a big gap there. This is a former prison, Patarei prison, also known as the Battery. It was built as a fort in the 1830s, and now it's really a symbol of Soviet and Nazi political terror. Today it's going refurbished. They're making there's a lovely place with bars and drinks. You used to be able to visit until a few months ago. They're doing a big redevelopment here. It's gonna be a bit like Battersea Power Station, it looks. It is very sad when you look at this building and you think about all those hundreds of people that have been locked in here, interrogated, tortured maybe, because of their beliefs or their fight for freedom, or sometimes for nothing. Some of them might have been completely innocent. They are about to do some interesting refurbishment. That's what it's gonna look like whenever the work is finished. It's closed to the public now, so don't ask me how I got in there. I'm gonna zip it now so you can appreciate the creepy silences. On this dark note, that is the end of my 48 hours in Tallinn, Estonia. I do hope that this destination is now on your bucket list. Next up, we're heading to Riga in Latvia. So look up for my next video. See you soon!